your favorite? How did you get? When will I be remembered? Was it ever? Where did all go? How do we know? Oh, forget it. Soren Bowie, Daniel O'Brien, two best friends and comedy writers. If there's an answer, they're gonna find it. I think you'll have a great time here. I think you'll have a great time here.
So, hello again and welcome to another episode of Quick Question with Soren and Daniel, the podcast where two best friends and comedy writers ask each other questions and give each other answers. I am one half of that podcast, senior writer for Last Week Tonight, author of How to Fight Presidents, and Tired. Daniel O'Brien, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Soren Bowie. Soren, wake me up inside.
Hey everybody, it's Soren Bowie. I am the other half of this podcast, and I'm happy to be here and carrying the load for the rest of the episode, it turns out.
Can I tell you something?
Didn't realize Daniel was tired, but I'll deal with it.
I know. When I don't think you have to worry about that anymore because I wrote this intro and settled on Tired about 20 minutes ago, a time when I was tired. But the on-the-fly decision to pronounce it podcast, that gave me a real jolt of life. I'm not tired anymore. I'm too pleased with myself for still finding magic in the minutia that I'm raring to go for another. I mean, there's no reason not to make this a shorter episode, but I'm raring to go for all of it.
Okay. Fucking let's do it then. This episode is sponsored by Uncommon Goods, an online shop dedicated to unique and high-quality gifts made by artists and independent businesses. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/QQ. Daniel.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you want to do a Thanksgiving update? How was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, yeah, we'll do a Thanksgiving.
That's a turkey backing up.
It was great. Almost my whole family involved, and I made we made some Brussels sprouts and some great kale salad that went over really well. There was a moment where I rediscovered something that I think about all the time, is that I must be just completely insufferable to be around for any length of time, because there was a very standard, like, icebreaker, not even icebreaker question, but we're all sitting at the table. We all do the things that we're thankful for. And then my brother was saying there's, a bunch of things that you could say, like conversation starters to have at the Thanksgiving dinner table when we're all gathered here. So we like just talking and sharing ideas. And the thought starter was, what is the most overrated piece of Thanksgiving food? And I bloviated for so long. Ultimately, I don't think ever really having an answer, because at first I said turkey and someone else was like, my man, yes, turkey. That's right. I was like, well, no, hang on, because the prompt was overrated piece of Thanksgiving food. And I don't think that qualifies, because most people don't rate the turkey very high. And anytime any other person was just trying to like politely answer the question, I would pop in with like, yeah, but see, here again, who rates cranberry sauce high? I would argue that that's an outlier, and it might in fact be perfectly rated. And like, that's not how you're supposed to play with the question.
No, it's like what sucks and what doesn't.
Yeah, you're supposed to say stuffing and move on.
Well, yeah, that's, yeah, you are a slave to the rules. I will say that, in the same way that my son is, and I have a lot more patience for it now.
I flash back to something. There was Chuck Klosterman, a writer I love and I've talked about on this podcast a lot, who also seems insufferable. He was on Bill Simmons' podcast years ago, and I was listening to them. And Klosterman is, if you don't know him, his mind works much like the way I just described my ruining of Thanksgiving icebreaker questions, where he will just overanalyze everything. That's part of his appeal as a writer, for me anyway, and part of what makes him, I think, potentially a terrible dinner guest. And he was on Bill Simmons' podcast, not giving a straight answer for anything, as he often does. And Simmons at one point is like, I got one for you. Who's better, Michael Jackson or Prince? And Kloster just goes, the bass playing on Thriller is some of the best that I've ever heard in my life. And I listened to this podcast in, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and I thought, don't ever be like this person. It's very it would be really easy for me to turn into that person. And now I think it's just happening. I think I'm sighing at the terrible burden of wanting to answer a question properly.
You know what? We talked about this podcast already, but we mentioned search engine on here when Ezra Klein was on recently. And Ezra Klein, I think, has like a hint of that in him, where like if PJ would ask him these questions, granted, they were like tall orders. They were like, what's a healthy way to consume the internet? But like the way that he would answer questions, I was like, just answer the question. Just say, don't use Twitter and I'll do that.
Right.
Just say this.
Right. He gives a long monologue answer to that, and you want PJ to say, "Oh, I'm sorry. We were looking for on phone." That's 99% of Americans responded on phone. So that was the right answer.
Yes. Yeah. Scoreboard says on phone. There it is. Yeah. I spent Thanksgiving with my in-laws here at our house, and they stayed with us, which is always really nice because they're like in that sweet spot where they're very active. They feel very young while being 70 plus, and like they can keep up with my kids. So if we wanted to be like, hey, we're going to go out to dinner, they're like, great. We would love that. We love to have a task while we're here. We will take care of your children and we can just go. And like, I'm so jealous of people who have family who live near them.
Yeah.
Like that was never part of my thinking. I was always like, get as far away as possible.
Right.
And then didn't realize like, oh no, that's a huge mistake once you have children, because they're so helpful. It makes like a show like Everybody Loves Raymond, where I was like, what an idiot. He lives down the street from his parents. You can't do that. Now I'm like, oh, you know what? Ray really had it figured out.
Yeah. Look at how much golfing he gets to do.
He works on his sports column all the time and isn't bothered by his kids. And his mom makes him food.
Yeah.
Sure, it's hell for his wife, but it's great for him. So it is really nice to have them do that. But it also meant that when we were cooking Thanksgiving dinner, it was way easier because they just went into the backyard and like played with the kids, and I could focus on the meals themselves. So we did like an elevated version of a couple of different dishes. Now, I know that as soon as people hear that, they roll their eyes and they're like, just put the fucking celery in the stuffing.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Except when you find a thing that works and is different than you've had, like I've had 40 Thanksgivings at this point. This is like a thing I'm sticking with. For stuffing this time, didn't do celery. I did leeks and fennel and like fried it up first and then put it in. And it was so good. And it made the stuffing infinitely better. I suggest it for everybody.
There was a major change this year, and I don't know how it happened, but there was no green beans at all for Thanksgiving dinner as one of the sides. And it was becoming clear in conversation that I don't think anyone really liked green beans or looked forward to it, but we had just like consumed it because that's what our parents and their parents did forever and ever and ever. And it was just like a wonderful realization to be like, oh, we can make every part of it the stuffing if we want. We can make all of it good.
Right. Ah, man, you guys don't like the green bean casserole?
No.
Interesting. Well,
I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but
it's got a ton of like, you have to put a bunch of whipping cream milk in it. Okay, that would make sense. That makes perfect sense. Even if a kind relative was like, look, we made it dairy free for you, I still don't want green beans. Like
no.
Oh, I do. I really like it. I love the little French onions on top. Although this time we did shallots, crispy shallots. No big deal. Just like a step up.
Sure.
Step up. Yeah. And then immediately the next day, decorated for Christmas.
Yeah. Well, that's always fun. I think in the last podcast was talking about decorating for Christmas. We got our tree, and this was a rare moment for me where I know how to decorate a tree, but I go to my favorite website, youtube.com, just to see if there are any life hacks.
The old watering hole, youtube.com.
Yeah. So I typed www.youtube.com and I hit enter and I go. And then
Daniel.
Yes. And then we were just searching around for like life hacks, because there's life hacks for everything now. And a lot of YouTubers were like, here is how you can string lights on your tree where you're not just wrapping it around thing at a time, passing it from person to person. There was one hack where it was like, you just take them, you start at the top, and you just like pull the long string down, and you do it like that. You still get a tree covered in lights. And there was another one who was saying, you know, those things you could just like buy these nets of lights that you throw over the bushes in your front yard. I just put them in my tree, and no one can tell. It still looks like it's a tree covered in lights, and it takes me like 15 seconds to do it. And Shay and I both were like, no, it's supposed to be hard. Shut up with that. I want to get really frustrated untangling last year's lights, and I did, and that's what I'm supposed to do. This isn't supposed to be easy and done in 15 seconds.
Yes, absolutely. Part of the reason, like with my children, I gave them apple cider. Like I made some apple cider on the stove with cinnamon and cloves and stuff. And part of that's because I like the idea of them getting into the Christmas spirit and looking forward to something, getting it in their minds so that next year they're excited for it. But part of it's also a pre-apology for what's about to happen. That I know what's good. As soon as I start setting up the tree, I'm going to start getting angry and very short-tempered. And they're going to catch a lot of the brunt of that. I'm going to be like, you're in my way. You got to stop running around. Like that kind of shit. But fortunately, Ronan was so helpful. Like he was my guy for when I was doing the wrapping around the tree. You have to hand that bunch of tangled mess of wires to somebody. He took it and was very cool about it and just held it in place and didn't try and do too much, didn't do too little. He was just the best helper. That's great.
At what age do children learn, don't talk to daddy right now?
Colleen and I have on several occasions said to him, Ronan, read the room. And now he finally gets it. He does know to back off. Our daughter is oblivious. She does not get it at all. But he knows. And it's almost worse because when he knows and then doesn't pay attention to it, I get even more mad. Because I'm like, I can sense you sensing it and you're still not doing it.
Yeah.
You still want to tell me about this string hanging from your hat. And it's not even a hat we're going to be wearing for another month because it's not cold enough. Yeah.
You do fake tree, right?
Yeah. So we got we bought a balsam hill tree, which is like top of the line, Dan. That's like putting shallots in your green bean casserole.
Okay.
And we got it 2 days after Christmas once.
I think I remember that. I remember you telling me this. What a great coup this was for you.
The financial decision to buy a tree at about 70% off. But it's been great. I love pulling it out of the attic, fluffing it up. It's great.
Yeah. I went to the same place that I went last year and sawed it down myself, which is a fun tradition that I enjoyed. And I Googled how to prevent bugs, because last year, did I talk about my tree last year on the podcast? How
I don't think so. You got bugs?
It exploded into bugs.
That's perfect.
And
for you.
I was just about it. It made it through all of Christmas. It was just before New Year's. I was about to fly to Cancun for New Year's, and I was like, I think I could leave my tree up. Let me just look at it one more time. And it was like that morning, a sack had exploded on the back of the tree, and it was just tiny praying mantis babies. I later learned is what they were, but I just saw like a million little alien bugs, and so I sprayed and got rid of as many as I could, and immediately stripped that tree down of all the stuff that I wanted to keep and threw it right in the garbage outside, and then very bravely left for my trip. Just like, all right, if I come home and it's more bugs, then I will have wasted that vacation. I will not come home relaxed.
I didn't realize you got a praying mantis tree.
Yeah. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but then just like doing some Googling this time around to find out what kind of insect typically lives in Christmas trees. And praying mantis is a big one. They lay their sacks in Christmas trees, and then when you move the tree indoors and it gets warmer for them, they assume it's spring and they hop right out. And luckily, it's if it happens to any of our listeners, it's not too bad. Most of them will die very quickly or kill each other.
Yeah, they eat each other.
You just they're not the infestation kind of bug problem. You could just get rid of the ones that you see and then they'll be gone. But I didn't even want to deal with the possibilities, so we just inspected the tree as closely as we could and like shook it a whole bunch outside. Because when you Google things to do with your fresh cut tree, the advice makes me very annoyed at how unrelatable it is, because it's just like, well, the first thing you're going to want to do is when you leave it in a big bucket of water at the trunk in your garage. And I'm like, hang on, what do you mean big bucket of water? I'm not even at garage yet. You think I have room in my apartment for a big bucket? You freaks. Where would it go?
Now, when you went out into the woods to saw this tree down, did you also just take a peek around at like some of the trees that weren't of age yet and be like, oh, next year I'm gonna cut you down so hard when you're of age?
Jesus, man, no.
Oh, you don't have a plan?
that would be a funny bit to do, to go to that farm and reserve one that's there now, and just like no, I'll pay for it now, but I'm gonna put a little ribbon on it that says sold, and you leave it there. You don't let anyone else take that. I'll be here in 2026
Yeah.
when
each year I'm going to come
ready.
back and check on it a little bit.
Yeah.
I just want to come back and see how it's doing. You're grooming a tree for Christmas and 5 years from now? I think this is a really funny bit, Dan.
I think so too.
Yeah, we do plastic. It's touch and go ecologically, because obviously cutting down trees for Christmas is in the short run not a great idea, but in the long run, all that plastic when you throw away your tree is also not so great.
Right.
So I think the sweet spot is, if you buy a fake tree, get a good one that will last you like 30 or 40 years, and then you'll be fine. Like, don't ever get the ones that have a light or lights built into them. I know it feels much easier because you just set up the tree and then boom, it's done. You don't have to hang the lights or anything. But the minute one of those lights goes out, you can never replace it. It's like this built-in obsolescence on those. You
are a few miles further down the road of being a good progressive human than I am on this score, because I'm not even mentally ready to start thinking about the carbon footprint of any Christmas tree decision.
Well, you don't have the space for it.
No, of course not. But
you
even
can't
just
have a bucket. You can't have a whole tree in your house.
I've shifted on a lot of issues in the world and as a person in it, where I consider what is like the morally correct thing to do and considerations to have. And Christmas trees, I'm just not there yet. I'm so sorry. And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep myself in the dark on this one for just a few more years before I finally take out the old internet and Google is Christmas good? And then
it is. I mean, there's such a relief this time of year, because everything is particularly bad, and like your own indulgences make you complicit in like the destruction of the world. Mm-hmm. Just your general life, like the way that you live, it means that you are pretty morally complicit. And then you have this time of year where like it's basically just saying it's okay, just let it go for a little bit.
My college roommate, and still one of my closest friends, he didn't celebrate Christmas. His family didn't celebrate Christmas. And we had a long talk one year where he was just like, yeah, it's I don't want to take anything away from anyone, but I as a kid growing up, it's very difficult. There's no replacement for it. It's not like there's Christmas and Hanukkah. They're just completely different things serving different functions. It's not a one-to-one swap. And it was just very alienating and very difficult. And I was like, yeah, I can imagine. I'm not going to change. I'm so sorry. I'm going to decorate our apartment for it. Everything you're saying is making sense. It's just not in the cards for me to change on this thing just yet. And actually, if you wanted to maybe you could change. Maybe you can start celebrating Christmas. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah. You could start with celebrating the spirit of giving and give to me this one fucking thing. Yeah, it is like with my children, it's so great with kids because like you can really every other day of the year, all I'm thinking about is them 20 years down the road and whether what they're doing right now is a good thing for them or a bad thing for them, and just trying to nip things in the bud constantly. And at Christmas, I let it all go, and I'm like, whatever you want.
Yeah.
What do you want? Let's go to Target and just look through the aisles. Let's just play like we are going on a Toys R Us speed run. And let's just walk through the aisles and be like, what are the things that I want? And you'll get probably half of those. And you won't even remember the others. Yeah,
Christmas is great. Should we get into the show?
Let's do the show.
Yeah. We have a special thing or should we do questions? What do you think?
No, let's do a special thing. From art and jewelry to kitchen, home, and bar, Uncommon Goods has something special to choose from for everyone. And with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. They've donated more than $2.5 million to date. Uncommon Goods is here to make your holiday shopping stress-free by scouring the globe for the most remarkable and truly unique gifts. That's the most important part. They buy these from small vendors. Unique gifts for everyone on your list. Whether you're shopping for your Secret Santa or your entire family, Uncommon Goods knows exactly what they want. I started scouring through Uncommon Goods because I wanted to find something for my wife from my son. We ended up getting her a really great pair of earrings that I really liked. But in doing so, I also found about 6 other gifts for other people that I know without even meaning to. You cannot walk through the website without stumbling on something for somebody you know. It's wonderful. It cleared up all of my shopping. Gave me a good opportunity to get everything done in one fell swoop. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/QQ. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. That's 15% off at uncommongoods.com/QQ. Daniel, I'll make it a quick question. Daniel, quick question.
What?
Do you ever wonder what you would sound like as a robot?
No. I don't think I'm too far off from a robot currently. I feel like in all the pauses in my speech, I would not be surprised if I listened back to this podcast and heard like whirring from inside my brain, just like buzzing of different wires going as I slowly malfunction on this every episode.
Obviously I'm talking about AI right now. I have like mixed thoughts about this because our producer and sound engineer and editor, Gabe Harder, has figured out that he can basically do because there's so much of our voices already out there, he can do an AI version of us.
Right,
and
go ahead.
I'm of two minds about it because obviously for my job, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. And I never want that to happen. But for this podcast, which I want to spend as little time on as possible.
Right.
I'm like, what if all right, let's run it for 16 episodes and just see.
Right. So a few weeks ago, Gabe texted us to say that we needed to record an advertisement for the show. So not in our normal record time. This was just one of us doing something as simple as pulling out their microphone or even just recording ad copy into a phone and sending it in to Gabe. And I couldn't do it because I was unavailable, which is a thing I say when I don't want to do something. And I was just hoping you would jump in and you would do it. But you were silent for a while, which is an A+ move. And then Gabe texted us and he says, if you guys wouldn't be opposed to this, I could also just use AI to generate what it would sound like to have Daniel read the ad. And I didn't respond because I genuinely didn't know if he was joking or not. Like, A, because I don't know if the technology exists to make an AI me. And B, because we just spent 5 months protesting against, among other things, AI taking our jobs.
It would be a pretty funny Gabe joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ultimately we didn't. Soren came in and recorded the ad like an adult. And I felt good about that and that I'm not being replaced by a robot. But Gabe had the audio made already. And I know nothing about it other than it's an AI doing me. And we're going to play it for the first time for both of us to hear on this podcast.
My hope is that you learn some things about yourself you didn't want to learn in like a 30-second bit. Like the words that you use as a crutch, the pauses that you take that you didn't realize until you hear it. Somebody else mimicking you, where you'd have to be like, "Oh, fuck me, I gotta reevaluate how I speak."
Right. I mean, there's the main thing, the top terrifying thing is going to be if it's very realistic, just how unsettling that's going to be for me.
Yeah.
Then there are tiers of other things beneath that, and one of them is going to be the same reactions that everyone goes through when they hear themselves recorded and they think there's no way I sound like that, and then I'll get very self-conscious about that. A third fear I have is that it won't sound anything like me, but there will be like 2 or 3 things in there that clearly Gabe thinks I sound like.
Those are his parameters.
Right. Like just someone like, just the entire audio is a stuttering mess of a person flubbing their words. And Gabe hears that and is like, yeah, that's perfect. I can't tell him apart. That's what he sounds like to me.
If Gabe puts in, there has to be at least one my ex-wife jokes.
Right.
That would be, there we go. That's Dan.
All right. Should we play this?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I want to jump in with some context for the listeners here. So, sadly, Daniel, it is true that it is impossible to get an AI to listen to your voice and then give it any kind of enthusiasm. So the version of what you're about to hear is actually it's called a speech-to-speech AI. So it has the data of your voice and then an audio file of me and my own voice recording what I want you to say. And then it translates that to your voice.
Okay. This is how they did that Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan fighting about Ratatouille.
So let's play it.
Hello again and welcome to Quick Question with Soren and Daniel, the podcast where 2 best friends and comedy writers cover true crime, but in a funny way. Ted Bundy, more like Ted Fundy mentally, was a bad guy. Thanks for listening.
Wow. So it morphed so like it was clearly Dan at the beginning of that, and then it morphed into Gabe.
It did. Okay, I didn't want to. I couldn't tell if I was crazy or not, but it did feel like, oh, now I'm hearing Gabe talk towards the end of this.
Yeah, when it got to the crime part, it was. But it was like it was you.
It was absolutely me. Yeah, it was terrifyingly me. I do like the bold future of AI. Still requires at least one human being, in this case Gabe, to put a bunch of work and effort into a thing. So there will be jobs.
All right, give us another one, Gabe.
Hello again and welcome to Quick Question with Soren and Daniel, the podcast where 2 best friends and comedy writers solve the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Well, why isn't our podcast that? It would be so fun. I've got a lot of opinions. That I can't wait to get out there. Whatever you're thinking they are, you're wrong. They're the other.
Yeah.
I go the other way.
They're the other.
No, that was Gabe. That was definitely Gabe.
And we've got one more here. Let's do this one.
Hello again and welcome to Quick Question with Soren and Daniel, the podcast where 2 best friends and... Oh no, Soren, you have to call the police. There's something outside my window. Soren, help, fuck, Soren.
It's so interesting because go ahead, Dan.
That sounded the most like me out of any of them. I feel like if it's got so much material when it comes to what it sounds like when Daniel says Soren, that it has a bunch of different versions of that sound really plausible to be me, and stuttering and pausing and saying fuck over and over again.
And you saying oh no, actually the no's were like dead on. Yeah. It reminds me of somebody did a deep fake when Bill Hader is telling a story about Tom Cruise in which they map Tom Cruise's face over Bill Hader's. Have you seen that?
No.
Bill Hader is on some, maybe Jimmy Kimmel or somebody like that, and he's telling the story about Tom Cruise, and so he's doing an impression of Tom Cruise in the story, and somebody did a deepfake where they map him over it, and it's like, it's eerie, and then every once in a while you get like a hint of Bill Hader underneath it, and then it goes back into Tom Cruise, and I'm like, this is the exact same thing, but just for my ears. Like I can hear, it would be so surreal to hear that without the context, because it is kind of you, but not really you. It's like a ghost of you.
Yeah. And it's very terrifying that, like, I mean, everything's terrifying, everything's bad, but this does give a window into scams that I don't even think are in the future. I think people are probably already doing this, where you could someone could call my parents and have my voice make it sound like someone is breaking into my house or some other kind of scheme like that. Yeah. And we as a family aren't sophisticated enough to watch out for those type of scams. We're still very much at the, hey, Dad, don't open the link that anyone sends you in any email ever. No one is ever going to send you a link. It's always scam. Like we're just barely past that hurdle, that there's no way that, I mean, we just have to add more layers of sophistication, which is like, now if someone calls you and they sound like me and they say Soren and fuck very convincingly, it still might be Gabe. I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, hats off to you, Gabe, for creating those fun little vignettes where what we actually would do on the show. Those were good little bits.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I say little, I'm not being demeaning. I mean, like, they're short. They're great.
Yeah, no, that was
good, tight little bits.
Fun and appropriately terrifying for me in a number of ways.
Yeah, I don't think I want it. I don't think I want it for me, honestly.
I guess I could maybe ask Gabe about this off mic, because I don't want to give our listeners a tutorial on how to do scams. But I am very curious, like, the stuff that you are using, could anyone do that? Could I just like go to AI.com and put text in the one window and put audio in the other window and just like mess around for a while for fun and eventually riches?
Yes, it's very easy to do.
That sucks.
This all took me maybe 5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, Dan, have you ever heard the thing where Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro fight over whether they'd want a ratatouille, whether they'd want a little rat?
Yeah, I have heard that before.
So I think it's got to be fairly easy.
Yeah,
because it's phenomenally done. It's like there's so much, I think, of those guys out there that it was very easy to match their cadence and everything.
Yeah,
and I think that Gabe's also, I think he's underplaying some of the work that he's doing where he knows your cadence.
Right.
And he's kind of matching it, especially with the introduction to the show. And that really helps.
Yeah. I am still fundamentally ethically opposed to AI taking our jobs. But I was also opposed to my job being guy who reads advertisements on a podcast.
Yeah. Oh man, if we could get it to read the ads. Also, I mean, it'd be fun to have it do the intros to the show and then just for the rest of the show figure out what was going on there.
Yeah. I mean, coming up with the third detail in the intro, today's was tired. That's like 90% of the work that I do for this podcast is banging my head against the wall, coming up with what I'm going to say to describe myself. So if we can get that outsourced, I guess I'm fine with it.
Well, actually, it is really comforting that we have a lot of time with that. I thought it was going to be much scarier than it was.
Right. There's an AI thing that's going around Twitter. I know you're not on Twitter anymore, but it's song, music, lyrics, melody, key, instruments, all done entirely by AI. And there's like an AI avatar of an uncanny valley person who was like, my name is Anna Indiana or something like that, and this is a song that I wrote, and it's all every bit of it, every tone, every note, even my design is AI, and it just sucks. It's so funny to me that it was released as a flex of like, watch your 6, Olivia Rodrigo. And then I watch them like, yeah, this is bad. This is not good. This seems like it was written by a machine and not a human being. This is...
That's what, during the strike, there was a lot of that where people are like, their jobs are toast. And they'd release stuff that was like, oh, you think this is good.
Yeah.
You think this trash is good.
Speaking of AI taking our jobs and writing in general, I got a quick question for you, Soren.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you a ticking time bomb for anything? I'll go first because
Yeah,
it's a
please.
strange question.
Explain it to me.
It's something that has happened to you a lot, and maybe it's happened to you, or you've heard it a lot. It's been said to you a lot, and you can brush it off. Something that bothers you, but that you don't feel totally correct in being bothered by it, so you don't make a big thing out of it, and you brush it off, but you just know that one day, not the worst person in the world is going to say or do it to you, but just the least lucky person in the world is going to say and do it to you. And you feel like you might snap, not in a violent way, or violent if you feel like it. I mean, I don't want to handcuff you on this. For me, it's someone asks you what you do and you tell them that you are a writer. And then the response is, I always thought I could be a writer. And that's a thing I've heard a million times. And I know you've heard a million times. I could tell by your reaction that you don't like hearing it. And I want to get ahead of this for our listeners as much as I can, because two things can be true. One thing, that is a bonkers insulting thing to say to a person. Second thing that can also be true, I completely get it. And it's not meant to be offensive or demeaning or whatever. Everyone in the world probably has thought at some point that they could be a writer. We've all got stories to tell. We're all interesting main characters in our own worlds. And writing is one of those jobs that doesn't require a specific degree to actually do. You don't need to go to a specific specialized school for it. Some people do. There are obviously programs, but you don't need it. There are plenty of famous and successful writers who came at it through different training or dropped out of school or what have you. So I get that people, when they say, I always thought I could be a writer, or sometimes they'll say, I still think I could be a writer, that they're not coming at it from a place where they're thinking, your job seems easy to me, and it requires no skill. So that's why, even though I studied whatever it is that I studied, I think I could do your job. They're not coming at it from that angle. They're coming at it from a pure, everyone's got a story to tell place. And they're also probably coming at it from a, this is a way to make conversation kind of place. They're just a human being trying to interact with another human being based on the raw data that they've been given. So I get it. And that's why I don't scream at everyone. But I feel it in my bones that one day, years from now, someone is going to say something like that to me, and they are going to get everything that I've wanted to say for 25 years of professional writing, or however long I've been doing this at this point, that I just spared everyone else. And it's not, again, it's not like this person who's going to feel my wrath did anything worse than anyone else. I just know, there are a certain amount of pages left in my brain's book, and every time someone says that to me, another one gets ripped out. I don't know how many pages are left, but we're going to get to the end at some point, and it's not going to be great.
It's very, very frustrating to hear somebody find out you're a writer and then immediately wax about how, I essentially saying, I had a lot of talent too. I probably could have done what you do. Because it's it's such a demeaning thing to say to somebody. Because obviously you're right. There's no metric for how good you are other than being published, but you have,
right.
And even that isn't necessarily a good metric. There are a lot of people who have so much skill and they're born with it. It's just something that came in them from the factory line, and they're good enough that they could be a great writer. But man,
Yeah.
the work that it takes along the way to do that, and to also motivate yourself to write, and to
Right.
have these things in you that like you need to say and stuff. Like there's just so much about it that's like you can't just say that to me.
Right. And because we've certainly talked about this on the show before, that when you're saying I always thought I could be a writer, what you're saying is I've had ideas, I've had stories to tell. That's fine. You're completely glossing over the fact that arguably the hardest part about writing is actually sitting down and doing it and committing to it. It's you're not saying like I would be a writer if I went to school one more day, or I would be a writer if something interesting happened to me. It's like, yeah, I would be a writer too. It's just a matter of like, sitting down and actually writing it all out. It's like, yes, that's the hardest fucking part.
That's it.
That's the reason my bathroom is so clean, is because I don't want to do that part and I do other things instead.
That's the scariest thing that I do all the time. Mine is actually also a literary microaggression. Like, just in terms of like things that people don't mean any harm by, but it's based in like they just have no context for how many times you've heard this regarding your job. And it's this one. I'm sure you've heard this, Dan. Somebody says, "Man, I want whatever you were smoking when you came up with that."
Oh, hell yeah.
That one drives me bananas because for the same reason it's demeaning, but also it's giving credit to a drug as opposed to like the very hard work you did to make something good and interesting.
Right.
And like what they're essentially saying is, I never would have thought of that. And that's a very nice thing to say. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind somebody saying that to me. I'd be like, oh, thank you. But they're saying like, hey, I never would have thought of that. And there's no way you did either. You cheated, and
Right.
here's how you did it. You used marijuana.
Right. We would get that question a lot from like interviewers in early Cracked days when we were doing weird sketches and strange articles and creative and funny things. It would be like an honest to goodness interview question from someone who was writing about us, or like when we were doing like a panel somewhere, a live panel thing, and people would bring up specific videos and ask what we were smoking. And it always, even before it feels like an insulting question, I was like, well, the platonic ideal, you'll get one of two answers, and neither of them are good answers. One of them is, I wasn't smoking anything. We worked very hard on this, and we thought, what is something that is funny and surprising that other people won't come up with and the audience won't be ahead of us?
Yeah.
And we landed on this thing after sitting in a room for a very long time, trying out different ideas that were not as good.
Yeah, a bunch of us sitting around tired
one answer.
and angry at each other.
Right. And the other answer, the other like only possible answer to the question is, oh, drugs.
Yeah.
And that's not a fun answer either.
No. I feel like Hunter S. Thompson ruined it for a lot of writers, honestly, because
Yeah.
he was somebody who was like, no, I'm much better at writing when I'm on mescaline, or like whatever he happened to be using at the time. And that very well might have been true. The thing is, like, people who have this idea in their heads that a writer's room is a bunch of writers sitting around smoking weed and telling jokes to each other is like, it's so far off the mark, because it would make the show so bad if that's what we were actually doing. If you're getting really high on anything and then writing an episode, it would be nonsense. And it would be, at very worst, it would be nonsense. At its very best, it would be the dumbest episode of television you've ever seen.
I had a very like a cousin frustration of that, where it's not the "what are you smoking" thing, but it's something that I would see in interviews with actors in comedies all the time, where the interviewer would ask how much of that was improvised. And this is only in comedy, which is a whole separate level of insulting that we can get into one of these days. But B, the interviewer really wants it to be improv. And for some reason, those stories always really stick out. Like, oh, this very funny Chris Pratt line in Parks and Rec. it was totally improvised. I don't know why those stories gain so much traction, and I don't know why interviewers like really push for it. Like, oh, so this scene in Barry, like, what was that? Was it written, or did you just go? You just go. It's like, why does it need to be Chris Pratt or Henry Winkler who came up with the thing? If what you're impressed by is someone came up with a funny thing to say, that can still be true if it was written by the writer first.
Yeah.
But like nobody wants that to be true. They always want their favorite thing in Parks and Rec or The Office. They want that to be the thing
On
that
the fly.
Nah, that's Steve Carell did that.
I mean, we used to
not one of the writers. Michael Scott said that.
Well, because the writers it's such this amalgamous gray thing in the minds of viewers, where it's like, I don't know who they are. I have no connection to them. I want the funny person in front of me to have said it. And I get that. Like, that's why we used to do articles on Cracked constantly that were like, some of the best lines from movies were ad-libs. And those articles would go gangbusters because you'd find out these people just like were so immersed in the character that they were like, and now I know it better than even the writers do. And like the dream of that, I get, is very enticing.
It would be so funny if Cracked still existed to come out with an article that was like top 15 best lines of dialogue in movies that were totally scripted. No one would want to read that article, but it'd be like, yeah, this iconic line, this make him an offer I can't refuse. Yeah, it was written. Yeah, it was written down by the writer.
And it was,
okay.
I mean, that wasn't what they started with. They started with nothing.
Yeah.
And then they worked on it for a while. They really
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me, aren't you? Yeah, that was written. That was I know it looks like Dustin Hoffman says it, but like someone else told him to after they thought of a bunch of other lines.
The other big misunderstanding about the idea of a writer's room or like writing scripted television that I get a lot is somebody saying like, who writes Roger? That person is a mad genius. And I'm like, that's fucking all of us, man. You know, there's not an individual person assigned to each character that like goes through and like does all the jokes for them. We're just really good at writing for each character because we're writers. Right. That's what writing is.
That's the assignment.
Writing is aping a style that already exists so that you can continue to produce, so that no one sees the tracks in the background. Nobody sees that this is like somebody brand new doing it.
Some very well-meaning people have in the past said that they've noticed a change and just very flattering stuff. Like, oh, I could see when you showed up to last week tonight, things are different. No, sir, you cannot. I would be doing such a bad job if you could. Please don't let my boss think that's what's happening. I need him to keep thinking I'm writing for his voice. Because that's what I'm doing, because I like my job.
Yeah. It's like, it would get you in a lot of trouble, I think. They're like, yeah, I mean, Klaus totally changed since you've been on American Dad. I'd be like, well, that means I'm fucking up.
No. I'm just steering the ship, and the ship pretty much steers itself. Please delete this tweet.
Please don't tag Seth. Why did you tag Seth in the tweet? It is funny to me that as far as Twitter is concerned, or was concerned, when Twitter existed and I was still on it, that the only people that like represented American Dad, it turned out, were Seth MacFarlane and me. Like we were when people like had a complaint or they wanted to say something about American Dad, they would tag Seth and they would tag me. And I was like, what must be going through his head? Because he has no idea who I am.
Right.
Like every time that they get tagged, they're like, is this guy like a reviewer of our show? What is going on? I was just the de facto. I don't know why. I think whatever audience I carried over is the most vocal.
Right. You were a visible person before you were a writer on that show. But yeah, man, if I'm Seth, I'm thinking, in what fucking Tumblr blog did this Soren guy say he gave me the idea for American Dad? Where is he taking all this credit?
It does make me very nervous every time it happens because I'm like, I'm not as important here as you think I am. I'm just hanging on by a thread, man. Don't put my head out there on the chopping block. But yeah, those are, I guess mine are, for the most part. I did encounter another one this weekend which was when someone says, I'm not contagious. When somebody who is clearly sick says, I'm not contagious. Because they don't fucking know.
Okay, good. I was biting my tongue on that a little bit because I was about to ask a dumb guy question of how do you know if you're not contagious anymore? And then I would feel like an idiot if you were like, well, there are 3 very obvious ways you could tell. And
There are some.
Okay.
Like if you
I know that.
when you get snotty and you have like a lot of expectorate, that is a sign that you have a viral load, which means that that's what your body's solution to the problem is, like it's fighting it at that current moment. But also like that's by design from the cold itself or the flu or whatever, because that's the easiest way for it to get out of your body to other people. So like the sneezing, the snotting, the coughing, like if you have those things, you're sick and contagious. Even if you haven't, go ahead.
I would always tell my bosses at Crack that I had a viral load anytime I uploaded new obsessive pop culture disorder. Because like load would be short for upload, I guess.
Guys,
yeah,
got a new viral load.
Viral, yeah.
It sounds so disgustingly sexual.
I know.
Just let out this huge viral load. I gave her a viral load all over her face.
All right.
No, I'm not done. I wasn't wearing a condom and I accidentally viral loaded.
It is still
her.
going. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, we are still in this bit. More on this as it develops, and I don't know. It's sun's getting real low.
I was shooting these viral loads like ropes. Every direction. I hadn't viral loaded in so long.
God almighty. This started out as our Christmas episode.
Oh, it did. Yeah, it people can't, and like especially with kids, like because kids also can't tell you how they're feeling or anything like that. So if you see a kid that's got like snot coming out of their nose and a deep one of those chest coughs, and the parents are like, "Oh no, he's not contagious anymore." You can never trust that. That parent is just trying to make you feel at ease because they really need you around at that moment.
Yeah.
Don't trust parents. That's the PSA.
Don't trust parents, don't trust kids. And I'm trying to think of like I'm certain there have been times in my life as an adult where I've said to someone, "Don't worry, I'm not contagious."
Here's the
based on nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can do it if you got like a bacterial infection, like pink eye or bronchitis or something, where I actually don't know if bronchitis counts, but like if you or like pneumonia or something like that, where you take antibiotics, and once you're through a certain day of the antibiotics, you might still have some symptoms, but you are no longer contagious. And that makes sense for it. But anything viral, no, forget it. You can't tell. You're not a doctor. Even doctors, I don't think could tell.
No, doctors don't know anything.
Doctors don't
it's
know
all
shit.
it's all fake. Every job is like writing. It's all made up.
I
Anyone
thought
can
I
do
could
it.
be a doctor.
I still think I could be a doctor.
When doctors made COVID, I thought to myself, what were they smoking when they came up with that?
Can we be done now?
Yeah,
that's
I think this
good.
podcast is over.
All right, that's some genuine laughter you got out of me, Soren.
Yeah, thanks, man.
The show is Quick Question, but you know that already. We are recorded, edited, produced, and soon will be replaced by Gabe Harder. Our theme song is by Mirex. Their digital album is available at mirex.bandcamp.com. You can find me on Twitter for the time being at DOB_INC. And you can find the show at QQ_Soren and Dan. You can also email us with questions at QQwithSorenandDaniel@gmail.com. Gabe Harder can be found at GabeHarder.com. I guess at some point he will be. We have a Patreon, and you can watch still images of our faces while the audio of this episode plays on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/QQpod.
At QQ Podcast.
Great. Perfect.
That'll do it.
That does it for me, yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
I've got a quick question for you, alright? I wanna hear your thoughts, I wanna know what's on your mind. I've got a quick question. What's your favorite? How did you get? When will I be remembered? Was it ever? Where did all the oh, forget it. Soren Bowie, Daniel O'Brien, two best friends and comedy writers. If there's an answer, they're gonna find it. I think you'll have a great time here. I think you'll have a great time here.